Hi, I'm Ashley Love at T2P TV. Thank you for joining us. We have Buddy Powell here from Sea to Shore Alliance in town for the big event for Cuba night. A lot of Cuba going on because it's in the news, it's in the politics. Please tell me about Sea to Shore Alliance.
Well, Sea to Shore Alliance is a small research and conservation organization, nonprofit, and what we're involved with is trying to protect highly endangered marine species like right whales and manatees and sea turtles. And one of the areas that we've been working for over a decade, and one of the very few groups that's been working down there, is along the coast of Cuba. And so that's why I'm very excited to be here this evening to hear about some of the work that's been going on there, and also just to try and encourage people to go down to see what an incredible place and what is left of the marine habitat in Cuba.
Now, it's been sort of closed off to the world at Cuba. Has that made a difference in the way that the marine life is able to grow and survive and evolve in Cuba?
Yeah, it's really a bit of a marine Eden, if you will. It's the first few times I went down there. I'm originally from Florida, and as I was going out to some of these very remote areas, I'm going, you know, this is what Florida was like 50 years ago, if not more, because they're places that are just essentially untouched, and coral reefs that are undisturbed and relatively pristine and extremely diverse. There are very, very few places like that in all the Caribbean and even the world.
Wow. And you've pointed out before, we've talked to you in a couple interviews, that you are specializing in manatee research down there, and that there's a correlation, there's a connection that you've been able to find between the manatees in Cuba and the manatees in Florida? Yeah,
it's really interesting. The manatees we have here called the West Indian manatee, and there's two subspecies. There's the Florida manatee, which has been very isolated, and then the Antillean manatee, and that's the one that's found in Cuba. And up until we started working there, nothing, I mean absolutely nothing was known about manatees in Cuba. Columbus saw them, he thought they were mermaids, literally, and he wrote in his journal that there were swarms of manatees around this spring in the Bay of Pigs. And shortly after Europeans arrived, they were hunted down and thought to be close to extinction, but we don't know. We didn't know until about 10 years ago when we began working with the University of Havana and doing some initial surveys and going out and talking to fishermen. We found out that they're still around, but they're very difficult to see because they're still hunted. People still eat them for food. And so, of course, when you're going out looking for them in a boat, they disappear. And so the impression is, oh, there's very, very few. So it's taken years and years of research and going to some incredibly beautiful and remote areas that we've been able to find them again. And what's intriguing, just to give you an idea, I started studying manatees when I was a kid, so 50 years ago, literally. And I started working in Crystal River, which is the spring-fed river in Florida, and we started out doing photo identification of manatees by taking underwater photographs of them. Okay, so I started doing this actually in the late 60s and early 70s. So I was down in Cuba, and I have a graduate student from the University of Havana that I've been working with, a woman named Anne-Marie Alvarez, and we got a report while I was down there that a manatee and its baby had been sighted near a power plant. I couldn't go there, but she could. So she went down there and she took some photographs and brought the photographs back to me, and I'm looking at them and I'm going, I know this manatee. And she goes, I know, you're crazy. And so I'm looking at him, I go, I think I know this animal. And so I brought the photographs back to Florida. We have a computer database where it's like people's faces with these scars. It pulls it all up on the computer, and there was a match. And it was a really, really good match. And this manatee is a female that I had photographed in Crystal River in 1977. And she had made her way down to Cuba, with her baby. She'd been seen 2 years prior in Florida, but we had no idea that manatees from Florida would go to Cuba or vice versa. Now my student, Anne-Marie, she's been doing some genetic work, which had never been done before, because again, we have information from all through the Caribbean and so forth, but there had been very little work done there in Cuba, and we just didn't know anything. And so some of her initial analyses is showing genetically a much stronger relationship with our Florida manatees than we had ever thought before. So that, with the sighting I made and with the genetic work, it's really showing that, you know, this relationship between, biologically speaking, between Cuba and the U.S. is very strong. And when we've been trying to promote conservation actions in the Caribbean, we've been sort of using manatees as an ambassador to show that, you know, if you try to protect manatees, you're protecting their habitat, which is this, you know, coastal habitat, and it's a shared resource. And Cuba and the U.S., and in a regional way, we have to sort of forget some of our political differences, because there's game fish, there's lobster, there's manatees, there's all sorts of shared resources between the U.S. and Cuba. And if we're going to try to protect our own, we also have to help Cuba protect theirs.
Well, just the fact that you were able to identify a manatee years later shows how much of a connection and investment you've made in these animals. What's the next step for Sea to Shore? What's the next trip?
Well, we're continuing to work down there, and we've been building our program, working with the University of Havana, to not only try to protect manatees, but also help to strengthen marine protected areas in general in Cuba, working together with our Cuban colleagues. And so what we're also trying to do is to increase awareness and interest, because it is such a remarkable and beautiful place with regards to the coral reefs and marine environments, as we're trying to bring or opening up opportunities for people to come down who have an interest in the ocean and you know, animals, to go out with our scientists, both ourselves but also our Cuban scientists, to go out to the very field sites and to places where they normally would not be able to go. And so we're encouraging people to go down on some arranged trips we're trying to make.
Wow, that sounds very
exciting. It's fabulous. I mean, everybody I've taken down there are just blown away by, we have to rough it a little bit, but that's half the fun. So everyone I've taken down has said that it was one of the most remarkable trips they've ever had.
Right, in wrapping up, what would your message be to cruisers, to scientists, to people who are interested in science and the environment? What would your message to them be?
Well, first off, when we can, you should go and have a chance to visit some of these incredible sites. And part of it is helping, if you're there, talking to locals and talking to people about how remarkable Cuba, you know, what you see there compared to other places that they might have visited, because it helps to reinforce the government trying to do more to protect what's left. And, you know, with the changes that's going on, there's certainly very positive changes, but by the same token, what's going to follow with coastal development and potentially more boat traffic and so forth, well, we know what's happened in other places around the world. So that's the other message, is that to help potentially, as Cuba continues to open up more to North Americans, that they are well prepared to be able to minimize perhaps loving it, you know, people coming down there loving it too much and the damage that can potentially be done.
Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, sure. Well, thank you very much.
TV. I'm Ashley Love. Thanks for joining us.